Shalom, shalom to everyone out there. It's me again, Damian Power from YeshuaSavesAll.com. Peace be to you in the name of our Father, Yahweh, and our Master, the Son of Yahweh, Yeshua HaMashiach. So today, we're going to be talking about the demonic roots of Xmas, okay? So I pray that everyone stays and watches this entire message. And please share this with anyone who needs to hear it because it's important. So, through the mercy and love of our Father Yahweh and His Son Yeshua HaMashiach, many brothers and sisters have awakened to the truth about the pagan origins of Xmas. However, there is a need to address this topic again because many believers who are seeking the truth are being led astray by false teachers. Okay, to see more about the pagan origins of satanic holidays that Christians are celebrating, please visit YeshuaSavesAll.com. Go to the free store link, and you'll see a book there called The Ultimate Spiritual Detoxification Guide. It's absolutely free, okay? So now I'm going to be covering an article from a historian, some facts about Xmas, the origins of Santa Claus, and do atheists celebrate Xmas? So first, let's start off with some scriptures. Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 26. Yahweh says, her priests have done violence to my Torah, my law, profane my set apart things, made no difference between the set apart and the common, not distinguished between the unclean and the clean, hidden their eyes from my Shabbats, and profaned me among themselves. So, think about this. The pastors of Christianity have not distinguished between the unclean and the clean. And the majority of the world is profaning the name of our Father Yahweh with these unclean, demonic celebrations. And our Father Yahweh has given us his clean, set-apart days, his Moedim, to celebrate, but those are being ignored for the unclean days. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 11 and verse 15 in the Aramaic Peshitta says, for both prophets and priests have become pagans. Yea, even in my house have I found their wickedness, says Yahweh. Verse 15. Therefore, thus says Yahweh of hosts, concerning the prophets, behold, I will feed them with wormwood and make them drink bitter water. For from the prophets of Jerusalem, paganism has gone forth throughout all the land. So we see how Father Yahweh feels about paganism. Now, let's look at this article titled The Unexpected Origins of Popular Xmas Traditions. Okay, and this is dated DECEMBR the 25th. So from now on, I'm just going to say DEC 25th. And the reason why, if anybody who is new to this page, to this channel, to watching these videos, is that the names of the months are most of them are pagan Roman deities. So I'd rather spell it out. So I'm just going to say DEC 25th. And when I come across the name JUSUS, I'm just going to say JC. So you'll know who I'm referring to or what I'm referring to moving forward. Okay. Now, this is the article. Though DEC 25th is a day Christians celebrate the birth of JC, the date itself and several of the customs we've come to associate with Xmas actually evolved from pagan traditions celebrating the winter solstice. Xmas is really about bringing about your inner pagan. Historian Kenneth C. Davis told CBS this morning. According to Davis, Xmas was celebrated as early as the 4th century, suggesting that it had almost nothing to do with JC. But think about it. This is the reason why Christians are saying they are celebrating this day. Now, this historian Kenneth Davis says plainly that Xmas is about celebrating your inner pagan. It had nothing to do with Yeshua HaMashiach, the Son of Yahweh. Remember the scriptures above that I read from Ezekiel and Jeremiah about the pagan priests and prophets that Yahweh did not like. He did not like what they did, okay? Xmas is a pagan satanic celebration. So how can it be for our Messiah, our Mashiach, when this is a direct violation of his word? Let's read Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 1 through 4, and verses 29 through 31 before we get back into the article. Here are the laws and rulings you ought to observe and obey in the land Yahweh, the Elohim of your ancestors, has given you to possess. As long as you live on the earth, you must destroy all the places where the nations you are dispossessing serve their mighty ones, whether on high mountains, on hills, or under some leafy trees. Break down their altars, smash their standing stones to pieces, burn up their sacred poles completely, cut down the carved images of their mighty ones, exterminate their name from that place. But you are not to treat Yahweh your Elohim this way. Verses 29 through 31. When Yahweh your Elohim has cut off ahead of you the nations you are entering in order to dispossess, and when you have dispossessed them and are living in their land, be careful after they have destroyed ahead of you, after they have been destroyed ahead of you, not to be trapped into following them, so that you inquire after their mighty ones and ask, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? I want to do the same. You must not do this to Yahweh your Elohim, for they have done to their mighty ones all the abominations that Yahweh hates. They even burn up their sons and daughters in the fire for their mighty ones. So Yahweh says plainly not to worship him as the pagans do, and not to inquire about how the pagans worship their false mighty ones, because you will want to do the exact same thing. Yet, that is exactly what is happening today. Christians are recreating pagan rituals that Yahweh has forbidden, and then reasoning in their hearts and their minds as to how they can take pagan worship that Yahweh hates and claim that they are doing it to worship him. Okay? He says, you shall not do this to Yahweh your Elohim. So how can this be justified? Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 2. Do not learn the way of the Gentiles, the pagans. Yahweh says, do not learn the way, the religion, the behavior of the Gentiles / pagans. Yet, as the historian Kenneth Davis said, those that are celebrating Xmas are unleashing their inner pagan. Okay? Thus, you have learned the way of the pagans. This cannot be justified at all, and shows a complete rebellion against the Creator that you claim to serve. This is blatant idolatry and breaks the first commandment. Now, continuing on with the article, quote, in ancient Rome, there was a feast called Saturnalia that celebrated the solstice. What is the solstice? It is the day that the sun starts coming back. The days start getting longer, and most of the traditions that we have that relate to Xmas relate to the solstice, which was celebrated in ancient Rome on DEC 25th. So when Christianity became the official religion in a sense in Rome, they were able to fix this date. There's little discrepancy about it, but there's no question that the fact that it was celebrated in Rome as an important day with gift giving, candle lighting, singing, and decorating houses really cemented Xmas as DEC 25th. Another custom we can thank pagans for: Xmas trees. Davis explained that evergreen trees signaled the return of life and light, as the winter solstice meant the days were starting to get longer. They started to hang an apple on it. So little red balls on green trees. Get the picture here? Question mark. So Davis here is hinting that the apples hung on the Xmas trees eventually turned into ornaments and balls hung on Xmas trees today, and are just recreating pagan rituals. Back to the article. So all of these things celebrate the idea that life and light are coming back into the world, which is essentially what Xmas means to Christians around the world. Mistletoe, though, that was started by the Druids, who believed it was an all-powerful healing item from the sacred oak tree. If you met someone in the forest, you gave them the sign of peace under the mistletoe. So people started to hang mistletoe above their doorways as a symbol of peace. This was such a powerful symbol of paganism that English churches actually banned the use of it, Davis said. Davis also pointed out that the very first instance of a war on Xmas actually dates back to the Puritans in the mid-17th century. They knew all of these things. The date, the traditions were pagan ideas. The Puritans banned Xmas for 20 years in America before the celebration became just too popular, end quote. So the article puts it all out there from the historian. Okay, it's pagan. Psalms chapter 106, verse 20. Thus they changed my esteem into the form of an ox that eats grass. So Yahweh said that the children of Israel changed his esteem, his set apartness, into an image of an ox that they could physically see, and said that this is what brought them up out of Egypt. The Christians have attempted to change the esteem of Yahweh into a corruptible Xmas tree and Santa Claus, and with vain reasonings in the heart claim that it is for the birth of our Messiah Yeshua. Now, let's look at some facts about Xmas here. Yeshua was not born during the winter season. And Luke gives us an indicator around the time he was born. Let's look at Luke chapter 2, verse 8. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. If the shepherds were living out in the field, keeping watch over the flock at night, we can determine it was not cold outside, as it is in DEC. Therefore, we can estimate his birth to be either in late summer or early fall. More than likely, it was near one of the appointed times of our Father Yahweh, okay, which could be either, as some say, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Shavuot, which many know as Pentecost. We simply don't know for sure. So how can Christianity apply it on the 25th of DEC? So who was born on DEC 25th? We look at Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14. tells us who is being celebrated on this day. Ezekiel 8:14 says, "Then he, Yahweh, brought me, Ezekiel, to the entrance to the north gate of the house of Yahweh, and I saw women sitting there mourning for Tammuz. And he said to me, do you see this, son of man? You will see things that are even more detestable than this." The women were weeping for the pagan mighty one, Tammuz, who died when he was 40 years old. Okay. When Nimrod died, his mom/wife needed to secure her reign as the queen of heaven. And you can see her in Jeremiah 7:18 and also Jeremiah 44. So after deifying Nimrod as Baal, which means Lord, the sun deity, she had to find a way to make Nimrod live again and bring him back to the people. So Semiramis, his mother/wife, consulted with her astrologers. And they told her the sun dies on DEC the 21st, which is the shortest day of the year, but it comes back to life on the eve of DEC 24th. She decided to say that the sun deity Nimrod impregnated her with the rays of the sun on March the 25th, and 9 months later on DEC the 25th, she gave birth to Tammuz, which is Nimrod reincarnated. She then ordered the pagans to go into groves and place a gift on a tree to honor Nimrod. So that's where your gift giving comes from, under a tree. Now let's look at point number 2. The church in Rome began formally celebrating Xmas on DEC 25th in 336 AD. So you can look at this. This is about 300 years after Yeshua. Okay. During the reign of the Emperor Constantine, as Constantine had made Christianity the effective religion of the empire, some have speculated that choosing this date had the political move of weakening the established pagan celebrations. Okay? So he just disguised it, is what he did. He disguised it. And we also know, and again, the link is going to be in the description box for anybody who wants to read the article. And we know that Constantine changed the true Shabbat, the 7th day, which is on Saturday, okay, the 7th day of Yahweh, to the first day of the week, Sunday, the day of the sun, hence Sunday. So Constantine was no stranger to paganism and has Christians engaging in it today. The third point, 12 days of Xmas comes from a 12-day feast of what I spelled earlier, Saturnalia. You can look that festival up and see it, okay? Chaldeans call DEC 25th Yule Day. You can look that up. Yule Day, which means Day of the Infant. And that infant is Tammuz, found in Ezekiel 8:14, which we just read a little while ago. Definition of Yule. Dictionary.com says, noun, Xmas, or the Xmas season. Origin of Yule, first recorded before 900. Middle English, Yole. Old English, Geol. And also Geola. Xmas Day, Xmas Tide. Cognate, meaning the same, with Old Norse, Jol. The name of the pagan winter feast lasting 12 days, later applied to Xmas. Later applied to Xmas. So this is a known fact, okay? Interesting, Santa Claus was known as the YULE Father, which we're going to touch on in this next bullet point. Okay. Santa comes from a pagan deity named Odin. Odin. And that's another reason why you always hear me spell out God, because God was a name and a title applied to Odin in Norse mythology. I have all the etymology to this. So this is where Santa's coming from. Okay, so Odin traveled around the world on a white horse with 8 legs. This is where the idea of the 8 reindeer came from. And Rudolph was added later on. So look at that. He would go around with dark helpers known as blackjacks or Krampus. Look this up when you get a chance. I'm going to spell it out so that you'll know what to look up. Krampus. They look like demons. Look it up. If you were good, Odin would give gifts. But if you were bad, the Krampus would beat the children. They later changed these demonic helpers into harmless-looking elves. So the Krampus just evolved into the little elves that you see today. They are disguising it to make you think that it's harmless. This deceives the world, and the origin of it all, that the world accepts. Okay? That the world accepts. Okay? And without looking into the truth, the end result is deception. So this tradition is still being carried out today. And again, you can look this up. Just look up the origin of the words that I gave you, and you'll see it. And like I said, I'm going to leave the links in the description box. Now, let's look at Santa is Odin. Okay? Santa is Odin in an article written by L.E. Phillips, Memorial Public Library. He adds this: Santa is Odin. And this was written on DEC the 20th, 2021. Quote, "You heard me, ! Santa has been heavily influenced by traditions surrounding Odin. The Norse God of the Norse gods, aka All Father." Look at that. As I write this, I imagine many readers with a cock-eyed expression indicating a skepticism that the two seemingly different beard-laden individuals could have much in common aside from their facial hair. The truth is, there can be little doubt that Odin, apostrophe S, lore has factored into Santa as we know him today. Here's the down and dirty on the comparisons. So the first one, he's listing the bullet points on Santa. Flies around in DEC for Xmas to bring gifts to good children. Has 8 reindeer pulling his sleigh. Is the most visually iconic figure of Xmas, symbolizing giving, joy, and peace. Before Coca-Cola popularized the jolly, jiggly Santa we all know today, Santa was depicted thin as often as chubby, and usually donned brown, blue, or red robes. Has elves who make toys for children, sometimes referred to as Father Xmas. And I want to make that should be right there. That right there should be a clear indicator, because we only have one Father in the heavens, And his name is Yahweh. There is no such thing as Father Xmas. Okay. Now he gives the comparison to Odin, the All-Father. He says, flew around in DEC for YULE tide to head off the wild hunt. He knew who had been bad and good and hunted down or abducted those who deserved it. Had an 8-legged horse that pulled his sleigh. Was the most iconic figure of YULE tide, a holiday that celebrated hospitality, feasting, and gift-giving. It's often depicted wearing either blue or brown robes. Elves and dwarves. Xmas elves seem to be of the two, originated from Norse mythology and are known as amazing creators. Was referred to as YULE Father, which ties into the definition that I gave in the bullet point above about it being the paganism of YULE, which came before Xmas. So you can look all of this up. Back to the article. Before I go back into the article, you can see the similarities and the comparison between modern day Santa and Odin. All they try to do is disguise it to get so the world could be deceived and to celebrate a demonic day. Back to the article. Though it's quite obvious that Santa has influence on Odin, we can't ignore some of the other obvious influences, such as St. Nicholas of Myra and Dutch Sinterklaas. A few other traditions that Xmas has borrowed from Norse tradition, look at that, has borrowed from Norse tradition include tree decoration, that sounds familiar, mistletoe, that sounds familiar, wreaths, sound familiar. Information from this post was gathered both from his personal interest in the subject and this article. Okay, so like I said, all that information is going to be in the description box. And I want to leave with this. Consider this. And I have one more article to quote from, but atheists do not want anything to do with Yeshua, the son of Yahweh, or religion, right? Yet they don't find it offensive to their beliefs to celebrate the same day as a Christian. Why? Because as an unbeliever, they know that Xmas has no connection to the truth, and that should be alarming to any Christian. If any atheist is celebrating Xmas and a Christian is also celebrating Xmas, how can we tell you apart? We can't. Simply put, you look just like the world, and we can't tell the difference between a believer and a non-believer. This is why Father Yahweh set his children apart. Leviticus 19 verse 2, he says, be set apart for I am set apart. Be Kodesh for I am Kodesh. And Father Yahweh gives us in Leviticus 23 all of his Moedim, his appointed time, what the world knows as feast days for his children to celebrate. But yet those have been rejected for paganism. This is why we can't tell a believer from a non-believer in this world. Okay, so now I'm going to read from an article it's called Atheists Celebrating Xmas from Spirit Crossing. Says, quote, another option is to accept that modern Xmas has little or nothing to do with JC anyway. The atheists know this. And that it is mostly a selling point for businesses and corporations. Every trick in the book is used to pressure people into spending as much as possible in this holiday season. If an atheist can find something to celebrate among the rampant consumerism, then they can celebrate it by loading up their credit cards the same way Christians do. A third option is to accept that Xmas has always been more to do with pagan traditions. I'm still reading from this article here. Has more to do with pagan traditions than with Xmas. And that almost all of the traditions of Xmas have nothing to do with Christianity at all. Evergreen trees and holly were symbols of the winter festival long before Christianity. Since these plants did not lose their leaves and appeared not to die off during the long northern European winters, similarly, the YULE, there that goes again, log is part of a Nordic, what we talked about, Nordic festival of 12 days of general feasting, partying, and drinking, probably in honor of YOLNIR, who was later called WODEN and then to ODIN, which we just saw from the article from Nordic mythology. Wow. And the article goes on to say Xmas was just a winter festival. Xmas is basically a winter festival that was hijacked first by Christians, and which has been hijacked by greedy capitalists to make as much money from it as they can. Xmas is more concerned with the winter solstice than the birth of a baby 2,000 years ago. It is rather odd that Christians celebrate the birth of JC anyway, since they normally celebrate the death, especially martyrdom. So, before I get back into the article, it's interesting that atheists understand that we are to remember Yeshua's death, which is why we observe Passover, which is one of the set-apart days that our Father Yahweh gave us in Leviticus 23 that the word is rejected, okay? But even atheists understand that we have to observe his death. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23 through 26. For what I have received from the Master is just what I have passed on to you, that the Master, YESHUA, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and after he had made the blessing, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this as a memorial to me." Do this as a memorial to me, as a remembrance to me. Likewise also the cup after the meal, saying, "This cup is the new covenant affected by my blood. Do this as often as you drink it as a memorial to me," as a remembrance to me. "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the death of the Master until he comes." This is why we observe Pesach, Passover. Christians, it's time to observe that. Okay, back to the article. Quote, such as those of the saints and of course JC. Winter festivals have long been connected with the birth of the invincible Son, Natalis, Solis, Invicti. The name given to the celebrations in 274 CE by pagan emperor Aurelian in a year when the winter solstice fell on DEC 25th. The winter solstice was also celebrated by many other pagan groups in Europe, and the celebrations include those of Mithras. That was the deity that Constantine worshipped, the sun. In the darkest, shortest days of winter, the return of the sun and longer days was celebrated. Again, the return of the sun and longer days was celebrated, which is why it's celebrated on the 25th of DEC. End quote. I pray that this truth has opened up the eyes of anyone who still wants to celebrate this day, this pagan day, and know that it is not from our Father Yahweh at all. As time is running out on this earth, it's time to repent and follow Yeshua HaMashiach in truth. And as always, may our Father Yahweh bless you in Yeshua HaMashiach's name. Shalom.